Have a seat. This isn't a sermon. It's been my practice to give my annual address at this point in our morning. And just so you understand, I'm not sitting up here because what I have to say is really important. But I have a lot more notes than I normally do. And this is a place for them to sit while I talk to you. So, think back with me to 2012. That year, a plan unfolded and it became real, a 5-year plan to implement family ministry in this congregation. And it included hiring somebody to take on specifically that work of family ministry. And it also included a vision for updating and improving our child care, our nursery care, unifying the Christian education program, and creating a truly family worship time. It also included targeted ministry, at least the plan did, targeted ministry to parents. And the result over time was paid staff in the crawl zone and an improved space there, the kids zone Sunday school, the reordering of the second service, the 1017 service, so that Christian education for children and adults occurred at 9 o'clock rather than, if you can think back, we had Christian education for children during the service, or at least part of the service, and then Christian education for adults following the second service. And what we've ended up creating is a 1017 service where families can learn together and worship together. There was also a vision to increase our visibility and accessibility. And what I mean by accessibility is to try to make it easier for people who have never been in this church building or any church for that matter, try to make it easier for them to walk through our doors the first time. And that included participating in some community events like the downtown, Fitchburg's Trick or Treat downtown. We've become ground zero for that event. We started a Pops concert, and we tried to create what I called a virtual window by recording the Sunday morning adult class and the sermon and putting it up on our website. The hope was that people who were using the internet to find a church would be able to peer inside, as it were, and see at least something of what we're doing here. Let me just say a word about that. When you put something on the internet, particularly a video, it better be well done. Because if it isn't, it's worse than if you did nothing. So we bought a good quality camera and we trained people, as you see, a human being behind the camera, so that the camera can be moved, it can be zoomed in and out, and give people who are looking at it a sense that they're actually looking at something dynamic. And I think overall that's been very, very successful. So the results of all of this, as I pointed out, we're ground zero for the Fitchburg Trick or Treat Day. We're actually the main event that day. Literally thousands, and I'm not making this up, thousands of children and families have walked through here last year and the year before on that particular day to participate in games that we put up for people, and of course to receive treats, and of course pictures with Darth Vader. Now, thousands of people have not had their picture taken with Darth Vader, in large part because the line is so long. Now, one of the other things that we did this year, or I should say the end of 2013, is we changed the Lessons and Carol service that we did a little bit. It was still, if you will, a Lessons and Carol service, but it was a darkness to light service with candlelight. And by all accounts, that was very warmly received and very successful. Now, on top of all of this, several parishioners have taken up the mantle of trying to increase our visibility and ministry in the area by coming up with ideas and implementing them. And those two things I want to emphasize together. It's great for people to have ideas, and a lot of people do have ideas. It's another thing entirely for those very same people to implement them themselves. And just a few examples of that. Vacation Bible School and the Thanksgiving dinner are coordinated by Erica DeLovo. Now, she and probably anyone else I name will tell you really quickly that, well, it's a team effort, and that's true, but someone's got to kickstart it. Someone's got to lead it. The spaghetti dinner with Irish step dancers that the Bedard family lead. This year we had a float in the July 4th parade, thanks entirely to the sweat and work of Jack and Paula Cattell. This vision of trying to make ourselves visible in the community has been contagious, and members of Christ Church have taken initiative, and that warms my heart a great deal. Now, just one more thing about the recording. Just so you know, if you go on our website and you go to the sermon area, you'll see recordings of Sunday's morning Christian education or the sermon, but they're not all there. I mean, not every one that we've ever done. And if you want to go to the archives, they're on YouTube. And we have a channel on YouTube called CC Fitchburg. So if you go to the search and type in CC Fitchburg, you'll find our channel, and you'll be able to look at all the old videos that are there if you wanted to. The other thing that started back in 2012 was a year-long celebration of 150 years in the heart of Fitchburg. Now, just some of the highlights included the kickoff gala way back near the September, October of 2012. The Lenten program featuring speakers from around the area talking about the cultural changes that we've gone through in the last 150 years. And it all culminated in our celebration last October on the 7th with two bishops, our own bishop, Doug Fisher, and Ian Douglas, the Bishop of Connecticut, who, as you know, grew up here at Christ Church. There were other events under the umbrella of the 150th celebration, but those are the highlights. And as I've said before, and it's worth saying again, all of this due to the leadership of Marilyn Benoit. And applause is appropriate. So in 2013, I said that wasn't going to lay down a new vision, that we had been given our marching orders. And that's still the case somewhat, but it's at this point that I'm reminded of a couple of passages from Proverbs. Proverbs 16:1, in the Message version of the Bible, mortals make elaborate plans, but God has the last word. And Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. So we had our marching orders, we had this plan for family ministry and visibility and accessibility, and we started down this path, and then the path started twisting and turning. As you know, our beloved organist Brenda Caldwell became ill and ultimately retired. And around just before Easter, Carolyn, who had filled in for Brenda from time to time in the past, took on the role of organist and choir director. She could no longer lead the youth program. For those of you who need to be reminded, by the way, Carolyn is the Associate Rector for Family Ministry. She's the person that we hired to do this. So she could no longer lead the youth program. Plans to further enrich the family ministry program with events and programs targeted to parents had to be put on hold. Overall, my assessment is that most of what we set in motion under the family ministry umbrella has not suffered, in large part because of lay leadership. Erica DeLovo, for example, stepped up and took leadership of the youth group. The Sunday school teachers had Kids Zone well in hand. I think that targeted ministry to parents in particular is what suffered over the past almost 12 months or so. But overall, God seems to have seen fit to put in place a lay leadership to cover what Carolyn couldn't cover. But something else happened during this time, this past year, 2013, that I didn't imagine, and I certainly couldn't have planned for. And I think it's a testimony to the power of worship, not only to strengthen faith and our relationship with God, but to inspire and increase ministry and involve people across generations. You know, we already have such a talented adult choir, and I've said many, many times that since I arrived here, I've sat in that box and said to myself, I get to be here. And I've always said that to myself while the choir's been singing. But on top of that, we now have what can only be described as a multi-generational praise band. Again, think back to 2012. We took out pews to make some space for the praise band. Now there's no more room for them. And that's not a hint, necessarily, to take out more pews, necessarily. It's simply to say that more and more people have stepped up and become part of that ministry, and it's truly multi-generational. It's been inspiring to me to see adults and teens consistently rehearsing together, stretching themselves together, and leading this congregation in praise of Jesus. The children's choir is another thing that I've seen evolved. And as you're going to discover this morning, I've been rehearsing with the children's choir for the last couple of weeks because we're going to sing something together later. And my observation while I was there at rehearsal was that the leadership of the children's choir is as much a part of the parents as it is Carolyn. The presence of the parents during rehearsal is motivated by safe church policies, but it's had the added benefit of creating additional leadership of that group. I know for a fact that the parents are working with their children at home. Carolyn helping them either with, here's a YouTube video of what we're going to sing or whatever, and the kids are singing at home because the parents are encouraging it. And it's obviously, that is to say, the children's choir is obviously meaningful to you because of the applause that seems to break out spontaneously so often, which is a good thing. So the end result is that although some things have suffered because of this sort of bump in the road, our hopes and dreams for family ministry blossomed in ways that, like I said, I certainly couldn't have planned for, and I never imagined. When we get a new organist and choir director, the praise band and the children's choir will remain under the umbrella of family ministry because it's in the past year or so, it seems obvious to me that that has been an effective way for Carolyn to function as the associate rector for family ministry because of her gifts in music, and so she's going to continue doing that even after we hire a new organist. Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. Mortals make elaborate plans, but God has the last word. And speaking of the organist search, I've been helped a great deal by our committee, Stacy Cody, Patsy Rush, Paul Ham, Deb King, G.B. Thomas. We began our work at the end of June last year, and it's been a learning process. It certainly has been a learning process for me. It has not unfolded in any way that I would have imagined. I initially imagined that it would unfold something like a rector search, where you get all these resumes, and then you sort of whittle them down, and then you call people on the phone and do an interview, whittle it down some more, and end up with a slate of people that you would invite to come to do an audition or whatever, and it just has not happened that way. It's been fits and starts, it's been spurts, it's been spotty, it's been hit and miss. The committee's been very good about challenging me, helping me think through things as we go along, doing things differently to try to get some more interest in the organists that are out there. And I've also been challenged by one parishioner in particular who will remain nameless, but he knows who he is. Just a little background. I'm not a meeting person. I mean, nobody really likes to go to meetings. So my default mode is to try to minimize meetings. So we got to a point as a committee where we didn't really have much to do in terms of work of interviewing people or going through the profile that had been created. And so when we got a resume to look at, we would come together. And so a parishioner, a husband of one of the members of our committee, called me on the phone and said, gee, Ben, maybe you could meet to pray? Ouch. Ouch. So, in essence. And here's the thing about that. So we started to meet to pray, and within the last couple of weeks or so, we've gotten 2 very impressive resumes. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but I can still count on 2 hands the number of resumes that we've received altogether. And these are the best resumes that I've seen so far. So, thank you to the person who remains nameless but is the junior warden of Christ Church. So that's where we've been and where we are. So looking ahead, now I have more to say about this at the actual annual meeting. Jack Cattell and Don King have been members of the vestry and or warden combined for I don't know how many years, a really long time. Now wardens come and go, vestry people come and go, but Jack and Don were the wardens during the search for a rector. And like anyone else in this congregation, if you go and thank them for it, they'll be very quick to say, well, all glory to God. And that's wonderful. But let me just say this about that. God works through people. And it takes cooperation. It takes the willingness to lift up one's own talents and abilities to God and put them under the service of God. And both of them did that, and that is something worth thanking them for. The transition period in the congregation's life is one of the most difficult times in any congregation when there's no priestly clerical leadership. So it's a tough time. I wouldn't envy anyone being elected rector and then being elected a warden and then having a rector resign and then suddenly finding themselves in a search process. It's a very difficult thing. Looking ahead also, and I don't know for sure, but it's likely that you're going to hear more about this from either the wardens or the treasurer. But there are 2 financial aspects to our life that I'm hoping are going to come to a conclusion this year. The first, well, they're both the Progen bequest and the Camp Starfish mortgage. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I just simply want to say and just remind you that the Progen bequest was given to Christ Church Camp Menominee, which had been sold. And so it was a big sum of money, and that money's been sitting in our endowment fund, separated from the rest of it, and just sitting there gathering interest, unable to be used because the bequest, the parameters of that bequest are no longer apply. And so for many, many years now, long before I came here, we've been working to try to get the bequest revised so that the money could be used here at Christ Church. And I'm seeing light at the end of that tunnel. The best light that I've seen since I've been here. And I'm hoping that that's going to come to a conclusion this year. And just to remind you, one of the reasons that it needs to be brought to some fruition is that money from that fund has been earmarked to help pay for family ministry. The second thing is the Starfish Mortgage. Now, Starfish is the organization that bought Camp Menominee, but we are the mortgage holders. And I'm seeing light at the end of the tunnel in regards to Christ Church no longer being the principal mortgage holder for that property. And that's a good thing because we don't want that property back. I know I'm not trying to dig up old wounds. I know that property means a lot to many of you. But it's been sold and we don't want it back. And the reason we don't want it back is because we can't afford to take care of it. We can't afford it. And we don't want to go through the process of trying to sell it all over again. So where we are is Starfish is really sort of knocking on the door of getting a commercial loan. And then that will be paid to us, a good portion of that will be paid to us. And that's the good news. That frees us up and gives us peace of mind that we don't have that worry out there anymore. But here's the thing to keep in mind about all of that. And Fader reminded me of this at our recent vestry meeting. Right now, the mortgage payment that we receive is in the ballpark of $7,500 a month. If we assume for a minute that the commercial loan will bring us, say, $1 million or $1.2 million, that goes into the endowment fund, but the endowment fund has a 5% spending rule. So do the math. 5% of 1.2 million is not 7,500. So we actually end up with less income after that mortgage gets paid, or the bulk of that mortgage gets paid, and we need to be aware of that. It's roughly $2,000 or upwards of $2,000 a month less in income. So we get the peace of mind. We no longer have to worry about that property, but we also end up losing a little bit in terms of income. So that's looming out there in the future. Another thing that's going to happen this year, thanks to an anonymous gift, this space is going to get rewired and new lighting put in. And there's a lot of good news in that. First of all, a potential fire hazard is reduced. The risk of a fire hazard is reduced because the wiring up here is pretty old. Secondly, the new lighting that's going to go in will be LED lighting, which is really good news for people like me and the choir who sit up here, because right now it's halogen chicken roasters. And you've seen me sweat at the drop of a hat. So I'm looking forward to that, not to mention it's all going to be very cost efficient. We're also applying for a grant, and if the grant comes through, the renovation of lighting, if you will, is going to expand to include the lighting of this area as well. And that's going to be a good thing, in part because the camera needs it to see and put our videos on the internet. So here's the question. All of this came up back in 2012. I used the phrase that Christ Church needs to be a growing congregation on the move, and we have been on the move ever since. Are we growing? Well, we have new families. We have broader youth and child participation in music. We have children who are clearly comfortable in God's house, and that is an awesome thing. I can't tell you, I grew up in the chancel and the sanctuary area of the church were the Holy of Holies. If I went there, I would probably be struck dead. And it warms my heart that kids just run up here like they own the place, because I think that's what God wants. We have parents and children who minister alongside the staff of Karen and Carolyn. We have a new movie night ministry led by one of our new families. And we have a dedicated and talented adult choir, multi-generational praise band, a children's choir, and we have the most powerful and uplifting worship of any Episcopal church I've ever experienced. But Between graduates going off to college and deaths, our average Sunday attendance is slightly down, about 5%. Mortals make elaborate plans, but God has the last word. I said from the very, very beginning, I don't know how to grow a church, and anyone who says they know is a liar. It's something that you take on faith and you set out to do it and you do the best you can. Along the way, we've made some changes. For example, we're no longer going to do the Pops concert. That wasn't having the effect that we wanted, and it comes at a period of time in the year when it overwhelms Carolyn and the new organist, whoever he or she may be. It's a bad time of year. But we're doing something right here. And if I'm off on that assessment, I need the feedback. I think we're on the right track. And so for 2014, I think we continue with our marching orders while navigating the twists and turns in the road. Faithfulness, flexibility, and fun are the traits that have gotten us this far. So I pray, whatever the plans in our hearts, may the Lord's purpose always and forever prevail. Amen.